There we go. So today we're talking about writing task 1 academic. And today we're going to focus on tables. Here's a typical table, and the task starts off with a description of the table. The table gives details of world electricity production by renewable sources in the 4 years between 2009 and 2012. So on this task, they want us to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and to make comparisons where relevant. And we have to write at least 150 words. You need more like closer to 200 words for a higher score. Okay. So when you see something like this is a typical task that you might have to do in an academic context. And they don't want just a straightforward description of this because that would be super boring to read, and that defeats the purpose of putting things in a table. So they want us to describe the information in the table, but also to make some kind of comparison, to add a little bit of value to our description. Okay, so what do you notice in the table? Okay, what kind of patterns do you notice?
All of them are increasing?
Yeah, gradual increasing, but
All of them are increasing, that is true. You want to first notice the big differences. You want to focus on the biggest, the smallest, and the biggest growth.
Biggest is solar, I think.
solar jumped.
Yeah, solar.
Biggest, smallest.
And the smallest is geothermal.
Okay, so the biggest would be which one?
Solar.
Solar.
Yeah.
Hydroelectric.
Hydroelectric. Hydroelectric by far.
No, sir. If you see the person like the change from 51 to 105.
Yes, but first we're looking for the biggest one. You want to start with the most obvious features, not the smallest ones. The most obvious features are the ones that you need to talk about first. So that's definitely hydroelectric by far. And in fact, I would talk about even how much bigger it is compared to the other ones. Right? So broadly speaking, it's like 10 times, it's over 10 times bigger, right?
Okay. It started 10 times bigger.
Yep. And what's the smallest? Solar's the smallest. Which one has the biggest percentage change over the period of the study?
I think wind.
So wind increased roughly by how much? How
100%.
much percent? 100%, right?
100%.
Because it doubled. Did anything increase by a higher percentage than wind?
What about solar? It's increased like by 5 times?
Yeah, solar is about 5 times the size.
And when you said solar has the lowest values, but what about in the last 2012? It is not the lowest at that year.
Yes.
Or it is mostly lowest.
Yeah, so here it was in 5th place, right?
Mm.
And here it's in 4th place.
Yeah, so it's
it
from the
moved
lowest
up.
group. Yeah.
Yeah, it went up 1 rank. So we can mention that as well. That's basically it, right? For this kind of table, you need to describe, you don't need to include every single number, but you definitely should talk about the first value and the final value. If there were anything interesting about the middle values, you should talk about them too. But there's no, like you see on line graphs, they go up and down, and sometimes there's these interesting patterns, but there's nothing like that here. So there's no real value because it seems to be steady growth. There's no real value in talking much about the middle values here. We're going to focus on 2009 and 2012. Let's look at a model description for this table. Okay, we'll just read it first. This description comes in at 190 words. So this is the target length that you're looking at. We've got 3 paragraphs. If you've never looked at this before, then there is a formula to doing this. In the introduction, the first sentence paraphrases the context. So they give you the context is here, what the table is about. And then we also find additional information in the heading for the table, the number of different sources of electricity, and the years. Okay. The second sentence is always the general overview. And it's just a very, very general description of the main patterns in the graph without any reference to specific numbers. It's supposed to be general, don't include specific information because you'll actually get a lower score for doing so. The table provides data on the amount of electricity generated from 5 types of renewable sources around the world from 2009 to 2012 in trillion watt hours. Generally speaking, electricity production from all sources increased over the given period, with hydroelectric being the main source by far. The first body paragraph simply talks about the 3 top sources. And then the final body paragraph just deals with the 2 smallest sources of energy. Okay, let's go into a little bit of an analysis so you understand why this was written the way it was. So a couple things we want to note about this first paragraph. It's the level of...
Mr. John, that overtaking, the last and the place overtaking geothermal, which experienced in the 9 model. Where is it? You scrolled it up maybe, or down? No, down.
It's right here.
The last one, the 4th, overtaking geothermal. Overtaking means that it was in more than the geothermal, right?
Yes.
It surpassed geothermal.
Yeah, so in 2009, solar was last and geothermal was second last. But then in 2012, they swapped places. So geothermal is in last place in 2012 and solar is in second last place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in this analysis, this is the first body paragraph. Note the level of detail in the table description. That's the first sentence. So it goes beyond summarizing the prompt. It also includes the number of electricity sources and that the numbers are in trillion watt hours. Note also that the general overview is general. So there's no specific numbers here. We're just describing the general trends in the table, what went up the most, and often what went down the most, but this is enough. In the first body paragraph, we describe the top 3 sources of renewable power. So notice that it starts off with a general topic sentence. Again, there's no data in the top sentence. It just prepares the reader for what's happening in that paragraph. Paragraphs have a controlling idea, and that controlling idea should be stated at the beginning of the paragraph. All right, so it's very clear what this one's going to talk about. Hydropower ranked first during all 4 years. So we're going with the most obvious choice, and that's what you should always do. It gives the starting number, and it mentions that it ends up slightly higher. Notice that we first describe the rank, and then we support that
But
with
is it
detail.
okay to change hydroelectric to hydropower? Is it same? Like,
It's the same thing.
Can we change that?
That's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Right. The important thing to notice here is that it doesn't just list which one was first, but it also gives the starting and ending point. So it's just like in academic writing, you have to support what you say with data. Okay. Wind came second, doubling over the given period, and it gives the beginning value and the ending value. Again, we have to support what we say with data. And then here's a nice expression, rounding off the top three was biomass. Again, we give the beginning and ending values and a description of the increase. Right, so that's an increase of roughly 1/3.
What does this mean? Rounding off the top three sources. What this literally means, like, what this sentence mean? Rounding off the top three sources of energy was biomass.
Yes, it's just an expression that means
the
this is
last
the
sentence. Yeah.
It's just an expression that means this was the third one.
Okay.
You could just say the third source, or the source in third place was biomass.
Sorry, Jan. It's Ivan. When you write the data in green, you didn't use the 0.4. That is any issues with my write when I write without that point?
Oh,
because
sorry about that.
That's
Yes, that's missing. Sorry about that.
But you need to use it, yeah, because you
Yeah.
can lose marks if you didn't complete it.
That's right. It's imprecise. Yeah. So thank you very much for catching that. Yes, that you need to include the 0.4. And for the final body paragraph, just goes over the remaining two sources, solar and geothermal. And again, it starts off with a general description without any data, and then goes into a description, a detailed description of these two sources. Okay, this is a very important comparison. Although the amount of electricity produced from solar energy was the lowest at 21 trillion watt hours, solar saw the largest percentage growth, ending at 104.5, a roughly 400% increase. So 5 times growth, 400% increase. Then it mentions that solar climbed from last place to fourth place, overtaking geothermal, which experienced marginal growth, means very small level of growth of only about 1.1 trillion watt hours per year over the years from 67.4 to 70.4. Okay, so it goes into a little bit of detail about what happened in the intervening years. Okay. Any questions?
What does a biomass is?
Oh, you're asking what it is?
Yes, because I know the other 4, but I didn't hear about biomass.
It comes from biology and mass. There's one dump in Toronto. It's out in the East End, and it looks like a big hill from far away. So what they did with the dump is they covered it up completely, and they're capturing the methane that's given off by the garbage.
Okay.
Right, so imagine it's like a balloon, but you know how like you know how a dead body, it rots and it like expands and it gives off
The decaying process.
it gives off methane during the decaying process?
Okay, yeah, I can figure out that.
Yeah, so they capture that. You can capture that gas.
Okay.
And then use that, and then you can burn off that gas to produce flame, boil liquid, and run a generator. So it's capturing energy from decaying matter.
Something similar to the compost is similar.
Yes, it's compost.
Right.
Yeah, so from your compost, you could capture the gas that's given off and then use it to create fire and generate electricity.
Okay.
But
I
for the
didn't know.
purposes of this, you don't really need to know what it is, right? Because they're not asking you to actually talk about it, just explain how the percentage change, how the values changed over the years.
Okay.
So if you ever get some term that you don't really understand for writing task 1, it's usually not going to be a problem. I mean, they could replace all 5 of these with just random nonsense words, and you would do this exactly the same way. Because we're not actually talking about the electricity generation, right? Just the ranking.
Only we need to refer the chart, right?
Yes, we're just referring to the chart. We're not
The
actually
chart,
talking about electricity.
Okay.
Right, this could be the number of cows, the number of pigs, the number of chickens, the number of fish, the number of goats, right? It really makes no difference.